emissions are maybe going to start going down. Like, really. And I've got a 300-page report to prove it. No, I didn't print it all out because A, I don't own a printer, and B, that would be a silly waste of paper for a YouTube video. So what is this? Is the end of fossil fuels really nigh? Are emissions peaking this year? Can we get a single good thing? Well, I'm Miriam, and if I had a cool catchphrase and a title graphic, I'd put it here, but I don't. So since 1999, so according to YouTube, longer than nearly 30% of you watching this have been alive, the International Energy Agency has published their World Energy Outlook. It's a several hundred-page report that energy wonks and climate reporters go wild for. But most of the time, it's just to make jokes about how wrong the IEA is every time they've estimated the growth of solar. The IEA was established after the 1973 oil crisis.
We have at present an absolute shortage. This situation is destined to continue indefinitely. And by indefinitely, I mean not only just the next few years, but as far ahead as we can see.
Which YouTube tells me 0% of you are alive for. Me neither. But basically, a bunch of countries signed on to throw some money and research at keeping an eye on things and never letting us run out of oil again. But now we have this report that says, no, we're not running out of oil, but this constant line goes up, $, Scrooge McDuck business is about to peak. And it could be peaking this year. Usually in this climate beat, we're talking about scary new highs and peak temperatures as really bad things, which they are. But in the context of fossil fuels, peaking is great because it means we're going from line go up to line go down. We won't know for a bit, but it is possible that 2023 will have the most fossil fuel emissions we will ever produce in a year, which is the case for this year. But hopefully after 2023, we never hit that high again. The IEA is a bit hesitant to make emissions peaking in 2023 the main headline, I guess because they hate good news, or because they don't want people to make fun of them for being wrong again, or maybe because the countries represented in the IEA make up 75% of global energy demand, or maybe because forecasting implementation of climate policy and global economics is hard. Whatever. The thing is though, until 2015, fossil fuel emissions were basically a straight line going up. And here, the analytics are on my side because basically all of y'all have been alive since then. So in 2015, the Paris Climate Agreement happened.
Je regarde la salle, je vois que la réaction est positive, je n'entends pas d'objection. L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
A voluntary agreement where countries said, yeah, maybe I'll reduce my emissions, I'll file some paperwork, probably late, and everyone yelled about it not having any teeth. But here's the thing, we did our nerdy little homework, and there are policies around the world that are reducing emissions. And if we follow them, maybe this year, more likely next year, probably before I finish my PhD, and almost definitely before 2030, emissions are going to peak. So how do we know this? Well, the IEA report draws from their analysis of their Global Energy and Climate Model, or GEC. And with that, they can run a bunch of possible future scenarios, like what would need to happen to keep global average temperatures from rising 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius? Or what does the path look like if we keep emitting like we are today? Or if we follow the policies that countries are passing. Apparently everyone that works on climate models suffers from the brainworms that make them come up with silly acronyms and initialisms, but the scenarios where we follow stated policies is called STEPS. And in STEPS, thanks to things like the US Inflation Reduction Act, new renewable and energy efficiency targets in the European Union, along with a price on carbon for certain imports, Canada's got this new budget that throws funding at clean energy and decarbonization, and Vietnam, Senegal, and Indonesia are pledging to decarbonize their power sector, things like that. It looks like by this year, emissions are peaking in the IEA model. But it isn't just in the model. We have already passed the peaks in sales of internal combustion engine cars, fossil fuel heating system installation, and gas and coal power plant capacity additions. If we already have hit the peak for building and buying, emissions from those are going to go next as the oldest stuff starts to go offline and is replaced by renewable and electric solutions, which means it's all downhill from here. In a good way. However, emissions peaking obviously isn't enough. The goal isn't emit a little less than last year. The goal is stop emitting greenhouse gases, to completely decouple our individual and collective lives from fossil fuels. That's what we need to do. And unfortunately, fossil fuel companies see this kind of optimistic story that we're possibly turning the ship around as a real threat. As I record this, oil company executives are hanging out in Dubai at the 28th Conference of the Parties using that same collective body that brought us the Paris Agreement to get new oil deals, including the freaking president of the whole thing. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia's government has a whole evil movie plan to pump more and more oil into Africa and Asia, plus OPEC over here releasing statements saying that pushing for emissions reduction will cause energy chaos and set the global energy system up to fail spectacularly. Obviously, the people with the money and power from fossil fuels aren't going to roll over and play nice, even with the writing on the wall that their industry is going to shrink, whether they like it to or not. We're at a time when a lot of things are happening. We're seeing the devastating impacts of a changing climate as temperatures creep upward. Fossil fuel use has already peaked in many countries and likely will everywhere soon, but despite that, we still aren't on track to keep the global average temperature from rising 2 degrees Celsius, let alone the ideal target of 1.5 degrees Celsius. And shortly after the release of the IEA report, the United Nations program released their own report showing that emissions in 2022 were the highest they've ever been before, with the rate of increase slightly higher than the last decade. Even the UN is getting sick and tired of saying the same thing over and over again. The now basically inevitable peak in emissions is great. It's wonderful news, and I'm going to throw a little dance party with my dog when it does finally happen. But it is not nearly enough, and it isn't happening anywhere near fast enough. And as the IAEA report says, we have the tools to go much faster, and we need to. Thanks so much for watching. Peace.